Hi and welcome back to doc.offcall. My name is Dr. Maddie, I'm your doctor from the UK. In today's video we're going to be looking at the new Baki Hanma season release on Netflix. Now if you haven't already watched that, please know that there are going to be some spoilers ahead. But if you're not caught up on the Baki series so far, you might want to check out some of my previous videos and I'll leave a link up here for you. But before we make a start, if I can get you to give this video some love by giving us a like, it will really make this guy very happy. Let's begin.
The Arizona Grand Sumo Tournament starts now. There's no way you can pick me up. After all, in just a moment, you're barely going to be able to stand up.
So in this first scene, we see the character take a blow to his left ear. And what I love about this scene is how accurate the anatomy is drawn. To start off with, we have the external auditory canal, otherwise known as the external auditory meatus. You then have the eardrum, and beyond that we have what's called the inner ear. And really this is the sorting area for the sound that we hear. And they've also drawn the ossicles, which are the three bones on the inner ear, called the malleus, the stapes, and the incus. Now these help to transmit sound from the eardrum all the way through to the cochlea, where the sound is transformed into neural signals before being sent to the brain. And then lastly, we have the semicircular canals, which are basically the balance center, which are located in your ear. And I love how unrealistically realistic this is. This character is really showing some great hair control, something which unfortunately I've never been able to master. But slicing up the cochlea and the semicircular canals in this way is going to lead to both deafness and difficulty maintaining your balance.
Perfectly balanced, this whole thing should be.
Off balance. I gotta stand up.
So what we're seeing in this scene is a really good representation of the symptom vertigo. Now vertigo is classically described as a room spinning sensation or feeling punch drunk or out at sea, which is really fitting because the word is derived from the Latin word verte, which can mean whirling or to turn. And the reason this fighter is experiencing the vertigo is because there's been damage to those semicircular canals that we highlighted earlier. Now the importance of these semicircular canals are that they contain very small crystals within their structures. Now the placement of these crystals within the semicircular canals tell your brain where you are in relation to the ground. Now if these are disrupted, the brain can't quite figure out where's up and where's down, so subsequently you end up experiencing this symptom of vertigo.
Boss, I lost that symbol. You think I'd quit that easy?
And again, we can see in this scene how devastating an injury like this could be. The fact that he's had his semicircular canals completely destroyed would make me think that this is going to be a permanent condition that he's then going to need to live on with. Whereas if it had been something like an ear infection, this tends to cause a transient or a short-lived episode of vertigo that resolves once the infection is cleared.
Hey, what do you think you're doing in here all by yourself? You know, normally I just shoot you right here and now without any warning. But since you're new here...
And as I thought, this was something that this chap was going to have to live with for the remainder of his very short life. And next up we have the final fight involving Baki Hanma and Buscuit Oliva, and as we can see the first kick is that to Buscuit Oliva's head, and it looks like it's just about enough to almost knock him out. And we know this because we see his eyes roll back and his body stiffen up, which can be seen in many realistic fights and knockouts. Now, the body tends to go stiff this way when there's been a head injury that's impacted the brainstem, or basically the control center of the brain. And what's thought to be happening is you get reactivation of a primitive reflex that's often seen in babies. Now, this reflex is called the fencing reflex, and it's thought to be a defensive mechanism whenever there's been an injury to the brainstem.
あんたほど不自由じゃない。そうじゃない。
And there we see 3 further kicks delivered by Baki, the first of which to the weak part of the chin, ultimately trying to cause a KO, the second to the side of the head near where the balance center would be, which would often disorientate the opponent. And then lastly we see a kick to the throat, which looks as though he's trying to cut off his airway. So although these look like 3 indiscriminate kicks, they're very well targeted and precise. So in this next scene we see Baki dislocate and then relocate both of his shoulders. Now, I'm not saying this is impossible. It is possible, particularly if you have something like a hypermobility disorder, but I can't imagine it would be that fun. And then in the second part of the scene we see Baki breaking out of these thumb cuffs, and there is some elaborate method that he does this by having exceptionally strong lats which reduce the blood supply to his thumbs and thereby shrink them. Now, there's a great video on YouTube where a guy shows you an alternative method of breaking out of thumb cuffs, and it's all got to do with how you position your thumbs when they're being applied. I'll leave the link down below if there's anyone who's interested. Baki, you might want to check that one out. Great scene because it also depicts exactly what you shouldn't do when trying to relocate a shoulder. It's all about pushing the shoulder back in, not trying to pull it out.
そういうのに縛られないって意味だと思ってたわけさ。違うんだよ。そんな抽象的な意味じゃないんだよ。閉じ込められる部屋がないっつうことなんだよ。
Oh, and in this next scene we see that Baki is really now taking a beating, and he's dropped there several flights, landing on his back, and unless he's Steve Rogers Captain America landing on his Captain America shield, he's definitely going to have damaged those bones in his back. Now, watching this scene is really interesting, and it kind of reminded me of anime shows like Akira, where you have those psychedelic or trippy sort of dream sequences. But I guess what it's trying to put across here is that that injury that Baki just received was enough to make him lose consciousness. Now, to explain this, consciousness is maintained by an area of the brain called the reticular activating system. Now, when the body receives trauma, particularly head trauma, this can cause a surge in electrical activity in the brain, causing the reticular activating system to shut down, thereby you losing consciousness.
そう、跳ね上がったんだよ、バキが。私がその変化に最初に気づかされたのは、バキの汗によるシミがまるで人の顔のように。
And if that isn't an anime awakening, then I don't know what is. But the way in which he's able to contract his back in such a way to fly off the ground in that way, there's only one word for it.
Beautiful.
But in all seriousness, can one's back truly be strong enough to allow you to pull off this move? Well, considering that there are people out there who can pull trains, planes and cars with their facial hair alone, I would probably guess so.
始めようか。どうやら私は大変なスイッチを押してしまったようだ。
Gosh, and Baki looks completely different in this scene after his awakening. It kind of reminds me of how he changed after the first time he had sex. And of course, there's video footage to capture in slow-mo just how Baki did this. But this is a bit like what I was talking about in my last video, where Baki really likes to give the very small details and minutiae of what these people are achieving. I like how there's this clock up there going in a slow-mo, telling us just how quick Baki really is. Okay, so Baki was able to develop this fighting technique through his grueling training and also the fact of his genetics with him being a HANMA. And I have to say, I do agree, practice definitely does make a perfect technique, whether that's related to my role in being a surgeon or in sports generally. I remember watching a famous interview with Kobe Bryant where he describes how he always used to do one extra session of training a day. Now that might not look like a lot when compared to other people, but if you extend this over a year, that's 365 extra sessions more than anyone else, and that's what puts you one level above your competitors. And when he did this, I kind of thought he was going to turn into a transformer, and in all honesty, I'm a little sad that he didn't. Oh gosh, the claustrophobia alone would be enough to kill me, let alone you being encased within a muscular, sweaty man. But I can imagine if Buscuit Oliva did a simple ab crunch here, he would not only be crunching his abs, but he'd likely be crunching some of Baki's bones. Oh gosh, and both fingers up both nostrils, and the danger here is that Baki could apply so much force up the nose that he could actually break through what's called the cribriform plate, which is a bit of bone that sits in the skull, separating the external environment from the brain. And if his fingers extended high enough, he'd give the brain a little tickle or cause some brain damage. Now, a fun fact is when I used to work as an ear, nose and throat surgeon, we used to use the route of going up the nose to perform surgery on the brain and access the pituitary gland. Of course, we didn't do it with our fingers, we had some surgical equipment. And I like here how their faces literally absorb the punches. In fact, I don't know if it's the faces absorbing the punches or the punches absorbing the faces. But what you can also see there is that the power of these punches is really being pulled in by engaging their back muscles. Now, this is testament to what Mike Tyson used to do, and this is also discussed in another one of my favourite animes, Hajime no Ippo, which if you haven't seen, I would really recommend. This was quite fun and interesting to see the patriotism that Buscuit Oliva has to America. And the art style in this scene does remind me of My Hero Academia, where All Might delivers his final punch, United States of Smash.
United States of
Okay, well those were the scenes that I wanted to look through today. Please let me know down below what you thought of this new season of Baki Hanma. Now if you would like any more of the fight scenes from this series broken down, please leave those down in the comments below. Now with it being Halloween coming up, I'm going to be putting out a few different types of videos around the theme of Halloween. I hope you do enjoy those. If you have any specific recommendations for a bit more spooky anime that you'd like me to break down, again, leave those down in the comments below and I will try to get to them. But otherwise, please don't forget to give us a like. This guy will really thank you for it, and I'll otherwise see you in the next one. Thanks.